Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. If a fire sparks in or near Washoe County, nearly a dozen different fire agencies could respond, all with different and sometimes overlapping jurisdictions. It can make for a confusing system, which has prompted some calls for consolidation in the past, basically merging several departments into one to streamline the process. But that is not a simple task. So for now, they're split and dealing with a few ongoing issues because of it. Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Chief Charlie Moore is here now to talk about that. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Ariana, thank you for the invitation.
So, this jurisdiction issue is a confusing one for a lot of people, and I imagine it's probably a constant source of issues for everyone involved, right?
Well, sure. Not everyone would know in any particular time whether you're in the city of Reno, city of Sparks, or in Washoe County. So if it's hard enough for the citizens, it's hard enough for the firefighters and the dispatchers to know where pieces of equipment are.
Yeah, right. And in some cases, you step across the street and you're in a different jurisdiction, right?
That's exactly true. And people are calling and not knowing exactly the street locations. It's hard for dispatchers to pinpoint their location and also call the appropriate agency. And
part of the issue with that, too, is when it comes to who pays for calls. So if you're in a certain jurisdiction, that jurisdiction is supposed to respond because they're the ones getting paid to respond to the people in that area, right?
Sure, but it's not uncommon to have mutual aid and automatic systems. For instance, in southern Nevada, you have the city of Henderson, you have Clark County, Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas, and they all seamlessly respond to one another's calls across jurisdictional lines, and they do it still maintaining jurisdictional autonomy. So there are solutions to that. Obviously, there could be a political solution to that with one fire department. But in the meantime, I believe that we need to have a better dispatching system than what we have now. We have some very old technology.
Okay, now before we get into that, I do want to kind of establish what our jurisdictional map looks like. We do have a map of that, so let's go ahead and take a look at it and we can explain to people what the system is. So we've got a lot of different fire departments in the area, and they're, kind of it looks a little bit like a congressional district map almost, because the lines are kind of squiggly and it's really hard to tell, who's in charge of what, right? So tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, we're looking at a jurisdictional map of the city of Reno, city of Sparks, and Washoe County, TM's jurisdiction. And TM is in the beige, Sparks is in the olive green, and Reno is in the orange. So we have various stations around the area. For instance, on station 17 right here,
we can zoom in there.
We're right on the border of the city of Sparks. So right across the street from station 17 is the city of Sparks. If a call were to happen just down the street, we wouldn't necessarily be dispatched.
Okay, and so the problem with that being, they maybe dispatch from 5 here, and if it's all the way over here, it's going to take them longer to get there than it would take you when you're so close.
Exactly. So the issue really is the closest unit dispatching, and that's really where the problem is. We have had serious medical calls where we've had fire trucks just a few hundred feet away, but they haven't been dispatched because the dispatcher really doesn't know their location. So what happens in southern Nevada is there's a system called automatic vehicle locators. I can pull out my cell phone and open up a Lyft app, and I can see how many cars are available for a ride. It's the same kind of technology as a dispatcher can see the location of all the fire trucks, and the CAD software, computer-aided dispatching software, can pick the closest fire truck regardless of jurisdiction and speed help on the way.
So basically what we'd be seeing on this map is kind of little icons like you're seeing with all the stations. They'd be little trucks driving around, and they could say, okay, well, here's our emergency, there's the truck, we're going to send that one because it's the closest.
And the dispatching software will do that automatically. There's very little effort on the part of a dispatcher to actually even have to pick that. So it's automated in a very big way.
Okay, and I want to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But first, when we look at this, I think a lot of people probably look at this map and say, why can't we just consolidate into a single jurisdiction? Why can't we? Why can't we just eliminate the boundaries?
Well, we can, but I think that's a solution that's many years away. It's complicated from a political standpoint. It's complicated from finance, from governance, and from a service level. And right now, the jurisdictions don't necessarily agree on all 4 of those levels. The Board of Fire Commissioners is not opposed, has never been opposed to a regional fire department. But it has to understand what it's going to look like. And there's potentially $100 million that would fund that if you take the city's budget, our budget, and the city of Sparks, you really got to know how you're going to spend that $100 million, because there's costs of labor, there's costs of fire trucks, there's costs of new fire stations that have to be forecasted in a pro forma. So before we ever embark on that, we've got to have a pretty good idea of where we're going.
Okay, well for now I'm going to let people take a closer look at the map. They can see where their house lies. We'll take it full on the screen there, and you and I can go sit back down and talk about this this new technology, which I think is pretty interesting. And I think the biggest question is, what's it going to cost? How expensive would it be to, implement the system?
Well, the software that we have now is called Tiburon. It's a computer-aided dispatching software in all 3 jurisdictions. The city of Reno, Truckee Meadows, and city of Sparks are now on it. So we all have it. It can locate the closest fire truck, but there needs to be a few technological enhancements before it can work. The other part of the problem is there's actually 4 dispatch centers. There's one for Reno, of course, one for Sparks, one for Washoe County, and one for Remza. So can you imagine when a call comes in, where is it supposed to be routed to? When it comes in as an emergency medical call, it goes to Remza, who determines the priority. Then it comes back, and there's a lot of phone calls, there's a lot of radio traffic, and it really is a complex, unnecessarily complex system.
When we talk about timing too, so say a 911 call comes in to the center, about how long does it take from the point of dispatch, and how long should it take?
Well, it should take under a minute to get the appropriate resource responding, and oftentimes it does. But one of the problems we have is we don't know the priority of the medical. So medical calls are divided into three different priorities. One is life-threatening. Somebody's having chest pain, they're not breathing, they're unconscious. Priority 2 is that they're possibly life-threatening. They may have some sort of condition that leads us to have to respond lights and siren. And priority 3 is probably not emergent. We don't know in our dispatching scheme which priority it is until we're well down the road. So we're responding lights and siren in a very big fire truck to potentially a medical call that's not very serious. We don't want to do that. We want to go lights and siren to a call where people really need us. That's one complexity. The other is we can have a serious medical call just a few hundred feet away from a fire station and not know it.
Okay, and that's largely because the system is too old. I think you mentioned you're 30 years old, you've been using the same system?
We're using technology that's very, very old, and most modern cities are using AVL. I mean, it's not really new technology, it's been around. We just have to have some collaboration amongst the entities to try to fix this problem, and that means some technological upgrades, and that probably means consolidation of some dispatch centers.
And it means probably everyone forking over a little bit of cash.
Well, there'll be some expense, but largely the expense is already embedded in the system, because we're paying for dispatchers. Each jurisdiction pays for its dispatchers. You may be shocked to know that Reno dispatchers and Washoe County dispatchers are in the same room. They can talk to one another, but it's very difficult to hand off calls to one another. Sparks is, of course, in the city, and Remza is very close to this building. So they're scattered around the area, and it just doesn't make for a very good system.
Okay, I gotta imagine everyone at home watching this is saying, why? Why is this the system we have? Why hasn't it been fixed already?
Well, it's what we have, but I think the issue is we're going to have strong collaboration between all the entities to try to fix this. So I'm looking forward. I have heard that Remza is very interested in trying to come up with a new system. The city of Sparks, we're working on a protocol with the city of Sparks to do this exact same thing in our jurisdictions where our lines touch. The city of Reno, I have heard, are interested in doing it, and so we really have an opportunity now to move the ball forward in a quick way.
All right, what's it going to take to move the needle all the way?
Well, again, technological upgrades, but strong political collaboration and figuring out what the costs are. I don't think that they're huge, but we are going to have to come to an agreement to say this is what we have to do. It's actually critical to saving lives, and that's really our mission as firefighters.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, is this a matter of life and death? I mean, if this doesn't get fixed, are people at risk?
Well, let me give you an anecdote. There was a respiratory arrest that was 900 feet away from one of our fire stations. We were not dispatched. the response came from 6 minutes away. If you're not breathing for 6 minutes, you're in a whole lot of trouble. So that, by way of an anecdote, this happens actually a lot. And it's a very, very serious problem for our agencies, and we're not serving the public as we should.
Now, I know that some of the different jurisdictions have automatic aid agreements where fire calls are concerned. Do any of those extend to medical calls as well?
Well, any agency can call any other agency for mutual aid. That in itself is even a slow process. That can take up to 5 minutes to call another agency for mutual aid, and you don't have 5 minutes when there's a cardiac arrest.
Okay.
So we do have automatic aid in place for structure fires and brush fires, but we do not have it necessarily in place for EMS calls and for everything else. It has to be a manual call. And all of that is taking time, and it's taking time unnecessarily away from our response.
So obviously important for the public to know about this. Is this you calling them to action, you know, speaking to their, council representatives, or what is it that you would like from the public?
Well, I want the public to be aware of what's actually happening because it's a very serious problem in my estimation. But the health district is actually leading the charge in their strategic plan. They've actually called for AVL to be implemented. So I think the number of the agencies that we have are behind this. We just need to push it forward. So it's going to take some study. We've got to figure out the technological problems and figure out the physical plant problems. Do we really need 4 dispatch centers? I think we probably don't. I think we could probably do it in 1 or at least 2 so we have a backup.
Best case scenario, how long before this is in place?
That's hard to say. It could take a few months. It could take a couple of years, but it depends on a lot of things. Funding, a plan to come together, and who's really going to lead the consolidated dispatch center if that's actually a solution. It's possible that we can share calls on the short term across dispatch centers, but again, that hasn't worked so far.
In the meantime, if someone is having an emergency, do you have any advice for what they should do if they're concerned about not getting a response as quickly as they need it?
Well, I would encourage them to contact their electeds when they're having the emergency. Obviously, there's not much they can do except call 911 and tell the dispatcher precisely where they are if they know that. But accurate information of the dispatcher is the best thing that we have going forward.
Right. Don't call 911 and hang up. We've heard that before, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Give them all the information you can. Okay. Anything else to add on this subject before we go take a quick break?
Well, I'm encouraged by what I've heard from our regional partners, and I believe that we're gonna make progress. But again, I think it's very, very critical for your viewers to understand really the way the system's working. It's not working well.
Good to know. All right, Chief, stick with us. We're going to take a quick break, but coming up on Face the State, I will be back with the Chief to talk about some new programs, lessons from last year's really intense fire season, and how they're planning to keep up with our population boom. Stay with us.